All right, it's all yours, Mike.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. Today, as Tracy mentioned, we're going to cover basic SQL queries. This should kind of orient you from not kind of knowing anything to having an idea of at least where to start and where to get resources. On PowerPoint. Okay. So today we're going to talk about like the broad decision to use SQL or not. What is SQL? What is a query? Where to start? We'll do a basic query. I'll talk about more resources and I can answer a couple of quick questions at the end. When I'm starting to look at, reporting, people think reporting is a single thing, but it is actually kind of, a lot of different decisions go into what tool you're going to use. And if you think about why you would use SQL and under what circumstances, you need to kind of know where it's the most effective. So I think of like an ad hoc versus a management report. Is this something where you're saying like, oh, might give me all the invoices made for this particular item over this period of time? That's kind of like an ad hoc report where somebody's telling me like, you just need to pull this data. We just need the information, which is very common, right? Versus a management report. The management report's more of like a standardized report. It's something that you run consistently. It's something that maybe summarizes information. It can also have, you can also return rows as well, but I kind of think if you're going to use SQL and you're okay with just having tabular data like a spreadsheet, that's what SQL does the best. It pulls out data, it gives you information. It doesn't format anything really well. So if you need a really formatted management report, you would look more to Crystal Reports. If you want something that's just ad hoc table of data, or something where you're monitoring a situation, or you want a list of POs that are late for their due dates or whatever, then that's what SQL is perfect for, just pulling raw data out of the system. You can use SQL for Crystal Reports. Don't get me wrong, it's the data source for it, but it just doesn't really format it very nicely. So what is SQL? It's SQL stands for Structured Query Language. I don't want to leave the HANA people out. It's basically, this whole thing is, it's almost the same. My approach will be the same. The only difference between the Microsoft SQL and the HANA SQL systems is there's a slight difference in syntax. The concepts behind it and the ways you'd get into it are effectively the same. You just need to, there's a couple tiny little details. So SQL is structured query language, whether it's HANA SQL or Microsoft SQL, SQL Server. And basically, it is a way of storing the data and then getting the data out in a way that makes sense for humans. So what is a query? The query itself is the specific structure of how you ask the database the question. So if you say, I need a query to pull all vendors we bought from in the last 6 months, you can structure a query in order to run that consistently and get you a table of data out of it. So SQL basically, the SQL database stores the data and the query, SQL query gets the data out. So where do you start? I'll cover that a little bit more in the demo. We'll write a basic query, again, more resources. So I wanted to show an example of how a relational database stores information. So I'm going to just close this and bring up my webinar example. So SQL basically is a bunch of spreadsheets linked together. So you can think of, like SAP Business One, and you've probably heard of the word SQL, or you've probably heard of the word HANA. They're all relational table-based database storage systems, regardless of their name. So if you're familiar with a spreadsheet, then you're really familiar with both a query and what a database looks like. So the only difference between a regular Excel spreadsheet and SQL is there are links between the tables, so you don't have to repeat the data every single time you get that customer. So the customer itself would obviously have a lot of data, and you'll see this is what we would say is the spreadsheet for the customers. So it has my code, my name, my phone, my balance, but we don't need the phone in the invoice table. So this would be the invoice table, this would be the customers, and this would be the contacts. So we don't need one spreadsheet that has the invoices plus the name, plus the phone, plus the balance, plus the contacts, plus that information. What a relational database does is to simplify the information. It basically goes, here's an invoice to this customer, the date of the invoice, and the doc total of that invoice, to keep it extremely simple. This is extremely simple. There's a lot more there's a lot more columns involved in this, but at a high level, you basically have this. And then if you want, say, the phone number of this customer, they don't store the customer's phone number in the invoice table. They store it in the main customer table. So if you think of SQL, the primary part of it is the joining. So you would go card code would join onto this table by this key. So these would be a key here. And now you can pull data from the invoices and data from the customers. You do another join, and then you can do, to rotate this around here. And then you could do another join from this customer code down here to the contacts. And now you can bring these together. So you've linked together these three spreadsheets using joins. And now you can pull all of this data into a table. So again, what is a query? It pulls structured data. It uses an SQL syntax, and it has an output of data in a tabular in a table format. So the end goal of a query is to basically link these tables together, but bring them back into a single table that's usable in what's known as horizontal data. So I'll show you a little bit more about that. Where do you get started? That's always a good question. So where do you get started? Just so you know, like anything you see in SAP can be used in a query. Anything that's there. So people are like, what can I do? Can I do this? And it's like, the beautiful thing about SAP Business One is everything you see can be accessed. There's data behind it, and the data is stored in the databases. And if you can see it, you could build it, right? So having said that, the best place to start is the query generator. Tools, queries, query generator. There's a lot of drawbacks to using this, but there's a lot of benefits to just starting using this. Tools, queries, query generator. So this tool is really good in terms of just getting started. And talking about my process to use this, you would first want to kind of think, hey, what information do I want? So let's go to business partner master data. You see this form. View system data, system information. So we'll turn this on. If you don't turn this on, this won't work. View system information. And then just hold your mouse over any one of these fields. So let's say here. And then you can see, I can't point to it at the same time as having my mouse there, but if you see in the bottom left, if you can see where my mouse is down in the bottom left here, as I put my mouse over it, you can see OCRD, comma, card code, OCRD, comma, card name, OCRD, phone, etc. This works on all the forms mostly. And so once you know the table, so you're like OCRD, OCRD, okay, these are all OCRD. So what you do is in your query generator, what we're going to do is we're going to pull a list of customers. So we're going to come here and we're going to go OCRD tab. And now all of a sudden you have the full business partner table. Okay. So I don't want to run it for every single person. So I'm going to restrict this, but you could push execute right here. And this will pull all of the data out for every single customer, every single vendor, every single lead. And then it'll allow you to export that. I'm just going to restrict it in this case to 10. Oops, top 10 star. You don't really need to know that. You could just push execute. So I'm going to execute this here. So you can see this has a whole bunch of information, all the columns, and you can see this is kind of an unrestricted, all the columns, all the information, all the properties that SAP Business One stores in the background. There's so many things like the data was created. And sometimes if I'm looking for a piece of information, I'll literally just scroll through and look for the columns. And again, you can see in the bottom left, balance, checks balance, you know, all these various things, bill to city, that you can refer to. So what you can do from here, and you can see this is all horizontal data because all of the data for this one record is in a horizontal row, one single row. So each one of these is a horizontal piece of data. So if you want to get this out of here, you can go right click, copy table, and then I'll just go into my example here and paste it. So now all of a sudden, you have all of the data out of there. You can filter it, you can edit it, you can do all your stuff that you need to do that everybody loves to do with their spreadsheets and formatting and the blah, blah, blahs. And you can use that to do what you need to do. But this is a little bit messy, right? So this is something where you kind of have to filter through it. So what you can then start to do, instead of using star, you can start to pull specific pieces of information. So I'm just going to leave the top 10 here, just again to limit data, but you don't have to have that. So we say we want the code, double click, we want the name, double click, you know, we want all these other things. Let's say group, little thing here. If you see that this is a bold column, that means it has another table. So as we're mentioning with our relational tables, this bold link here means that they only store the code of the customer group in this table. They don't store the name because you can always go and edit the name. You could go and edit the name, but you don't want to have to change that name in every single one of the customers. So the code of that particular group never changes. So it's a little harder to understand, but left click, hold it and drag it over here. And now you have the second table for the name. So I can then go with the customer's name or customer's group name. I'll just add a couple more things. Phone 1, phone 2, and balance. Okay, so I've added a few properties, 2 tables. You could get crazy in here and add tons and tons more tables. It's kind of sort of difficult to do much more complex queries without SQL Management Studio, but you get the idea. You can find the table, you can pull a list, and then you can start writing in here. So with the structured query language, you have various statements. So you have the select statement, from statement, where statement, sort by, group by. Okay, and keep in mind that if you're using this method of pulling data, there is no way that you can damage the database whatsoever. I could put like whatever I want, you know, delete everything. And it's like, it's not going to do it. That's not how you do it. But there's no possible way directly from here that you can do it as long as you do it this way. Just do not use update. Do not use delete, do not use alter. I believe that as out of the box, SAP blocks you from doing those in this format anyway. So just watch out. But under normal circumstances, you're doing this. If you totally screw up, the worst case scenario, you're going to get a red bar error at the bottom and you're going to get frustrated. You're not going to damage any of the data. So I really think like if you want a customer list, just do this. Very straightforward. So I've done these joins. I have my columns. The select is what I'm going to pull. The from is where I'm going to pull it. The where is what I'm going to filter by, and I'll do that in a second. The sorting is how it's going to sort the table. And the grouping allows you to summarize things. So you could pull, and we could do this quickly too, is you could pull a list of invoices grouped by the card name and summarizing the totals. So you could say group it by the card name, sum up the totals for this range. So you'd say where the date range was between X and Y, grouped by what you wanted to group by. You don't want it to keep repeating the customer per invoice. You want it to group it by, you know, 1 row per Battleship Cobra, 1 row per customer 2, or 1 row per customer 3. And then you're just going to summarize the balance. So let's run this one. I'll just do top 10 again. Again, you don't need that. Okay, so we have all this information. Now it's looking a lot nicer. So what you can do here is, you could say, oh, I would really want the customer group name to be called something else, but I don't want to constantly be changing the name. So you could go customer group and do a little alias there. So now when I run it, customer group, so it was called group name. Sometimes the names are less attractive. Let's say they're just database totals. And this way I can change it to have more context, or if I do a calculated field, I could rename it to whatever I want, etc. Those are called aliases, column aliases. Then I'm going to say where. So I'm going to filter this card type. And without getting into too much detail, you basically just say where it's a customer. So if you look at your list, let's just try this again. I'm going to edit it here, top 10 star. Again, a really good place to start here is to just do a symbol table. So I could see BP type, C. And you can also use the database reference here. So I have this up, which is a good thing to use. So we can send you this. And if I look for database table reference, this will help you to understand what you have going on here. So you have OCRD, we found it. Card code, we have its kind of statistics and how it's made in the tables, how many characters can fit there. Group code, see, it has a foreign table, OCRG, and you could dig into that through this link. But you could see card type has 3 options, C, S, and L. And if you go back to the card type, you should be able to kind of logic your way through this. C, customer, S, vendor. It's kind of confusing. It's S, not supplier, supplier, vendor. I don't really know what the difference is. They're interchangeable here in Canada at least. And then lead. So clearly you could pick one of those 3 and that will give you the information you want. So when you're starting to filter, you say card type equals C. You could say where account balance is X or above X. Anything you can think of, you can filter. I'm not going to cover too much to do with that. Sort by, we could just put whatever we want in there, name, and we could just run it again. We'll get the same information effectively, but we want to take the top 10. I'm taking the top 10 of the C's sorted by this, and I'm not going to group it. Right click, copy table. I don't want to see people using this anymore. This thing is completely deprecated. It's irrelevant. Don't use it anymore if you can't. I think but before 9.2, 9.3, you needed to use it, but just open up your spreadsheet, right click, copy table. In fact, you can copy basically any table, if you do sales order, if you do a sales order, last one here, go to here, right click, and you can copy table. It'll work the same. So no longer do you have to use that Excel output. It's just an old way of doing it, and it's frankly kind of annoying. Right click, copy table, 3rd page, and there you go. Your data is out there. So that's very straightforward. So again, we can do the same thing like in my example. We'll leave that, tools, queries, query generator. Let's go to an invoice. A lot of people want sales information. Go to the last one. So we're going to hold this here. You see in the very bottom left, OINV. So I know the table is OINV. I can also push tab here to bring up the whole list, OINV. So you see, oh, okay, great, invoices. Choose that. Oops. And then you can see here that relational link that I showed you in this example, card code to OCRD. I can basically left click on card code because it's bold, drag it over to this list. And now all of a sudden you have OCRD as well. So we could pull docnum, doc date, due date, and then whatever else we want, customer code, customer name, and maybe we want our doc total in here. And so now you have a nice little query that will give you that basic information. And once you have the query written, you can save it and deploy it right to your query manager. So we've written this, we have our perfectly clean code. This is extremely simple, but still useful. Save as, and we could just put it into one of these things. So I'll say general VP list. Well, let's just say call it customer list, version 1.0, save it. Now, if you need to reuse that, you can go back to your query manager, general customer list v1.0. You can minimize the code there, and then you can see this over and over. So if you have like a time-based or an exception-based query, maybe you're saying, show me all the purchase orders that are open where the due date is beyond or is behind today's date, and saying, oh, these POs should not be open. And I would like just a quick list so I can periodically check those. Again, that feeds also into a Crystal report or doing a dashboard, but this gives you the real basic data. You can copy it. You can drill into most of the data here. And so you could, if you had a list of POs, you could drill into overdue POs, find those. Those are just a couple of very simple examples of how you would do it. If you do have B1 up, you can format this in a much nicer way. You don't have to have this code at the top. You can manually put golden arrows. You could do sums. You could do sums in the system one. You just push control, and then click the top of the column. That will do the sum, but you can't automatically put sums in there. There's a lot of other things that the B1 up queries can do. In fact, the queries can put the query into the menu. I think version 10 can do that out of the box too. But anyway, so that's how you would deploy it. So more resources on how to learn. Firstly, I want you to experiment. I don't want you to be afraid with anything to select. If you get like something wrong in here, it'll just give you this error. Skim through here and you'll kind of start to recognize something that's wrong, or if you forgot something, you'll see an error. SQL is pretty forgiving in when you're working with it. So I want you to experiment. I don't like it when people steal, but I don't mind if you steal code, because that's a way that you're going to learn. So just search inventory query in SAP Business One, say for example, or search X query in SAP Business One. This has given me so much information and so many examples. So you can see that if you go, well, first you can say more results from SAP from this answers here, drill into this query, and you could just take some of this data. Some of these are cleaner and easier to use than others, but you'll get kind of an idea of how people are doing things, what tables they're doing, what joins they're doing. And in a lot of cases, you'll find something pretty close to what you're doing. You got to watch out for creating tables, but there's a lot of good, and these are pretty complicated. But like I said, if you keep looking through these, you're going to find something, and you're going to find kind of a minimum example of what you can do. You can just go to Tools, Queries, Query Generator, push Execute, push the pencil, and just paste the example query here and try to run it. Again, watch out for update, watch out for create, watch out for delete, etc. That's not very typical that they're going to have those in those. Just be aware. Paste the query there and run it. So you'll get kind of a basic idea of what you're going to use, what tables you're going to use, and kind of the way that you're going to structure the data. For both HANA and SQL, you can just search SQL, how do I do this? Or HANA, how do I do that? And just search like SAP Business, you don't even need to have SAP Business One. There's so many people using SQL out there. There's so many good references that you're going to find something, and you're going to get some sort of way of finding what you need, finding the tables, and finding the structure. I really, for the next steps, I really want you guys to be realistic. I get people that come to me and they're like, I need, my boss has told me I need to build a P&L replacement because they don't like SAPs. And it's like, you have absolutely no clue how to do anything in SQL. Don't start with that. That would be like a 8 out of 10 total brain buster to get it really perfect how you want it. And you probably don't even want it in a tabular format. Then you're going to have to do it in Crystal. don't set yourself up for failure. Pick something that's simple and then try to dig into that. That's not very exciting, you know, it's not very exciting recommendation by me, but it's the way that you're going to learn. Try to do something you're going to do, then push yourself a little bit. Start with adding more columns, start with table aliases, and that's how you're going to learn. You're not going to learn by setting unrealistic expectations and then saying, I need this tomorrow, and then trying to get it done by yourself. You know, use it. And once you're familiar with it, then you're going to start to build up your powers. You're going to be able to pull ad hoc queries really quickly. You can use your queries to build crystal reports and other business intelligence reports and objects, and you'll get there. But you need to start with something that's realistic that you can achieve, and or ask for, you know, if you need a consultant to help train you, we can do that too, or ask for example queries. I always like to draw out my queries too, what tables I need. And you can also then say, what are the tables I want? And then go underneath them and map out where you're going to need the data from SAP. So then you figure out how do those tables join together. So then you figure out how the tables join together, and then you'll be able to work your way up to another level. Again, steal code. It's free and it's out there, and especially on the forum, people will help you. You can write even questions on the SAP forum too, and usually you'll get a somewhat decent response. But really experiment and try it yourself too. So that's basically it for queries. You know what an ad hoc report is versus a management report. You know what SQL is, it stores data. You know what a query is, it's how you get data out of the database. Where you're going to start, you're going to pick a realistic query that you can build. You're going to use your view system information, and you're going to write a basic query using maybe just a select and a from statement right from the query generator, tools, queries, query generator. You're going to look at more resources, just Googling it, and you're going to find some stuff, and you're going to work your way up. And pretty soon, before you know it, you're going to be writing a ton of queries. That's it. Does anybody have any quick questions for me?
Thanks, Mike. Thanks. Does anybody, any questions? You can raise your hand or just use the chat box. If you raise your hand, I'll just unmute you. Everybody's all right? Nobody needs anything? I'm gonna, this is quick, so I'm gonna have the recording for this session on our YouTube page for Gestic YouTube. You'll find it in the coffee break playlist, but if anybody wants a link, just send me an email and I'll stick you on my little list of people that wanted me to send it when I got it. So, well, looks like all is well, Mike. So thanks a lot. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Thank you very much.
See you soon. Thanks.
Bye for now.